Good evening, everybody. I think we will make a start and a happy first Monday of Advent as we begin the holy season of Advent. And today's gospel reading, today is the feast of St. Andrew. Now, Andrew never became quite as famous as his brother, Peter, but he became a very important apostle. And the reading in today's gospel says that Jesus came along and saw Peter and Andrew tending their fishing nets and said to them, "Come, follow me." And they left everything immediately and followed him. And the mystery of that. So let us pray that when all of us are called to discipleship to Jesus, and let us pray that we can respond as willingly and as openly as Andrew did. Amen. My name is Thomas Groom. I'm a long-serving, long-suffering professor of theology and religious education here at Boston College. And I've been associated with Church in the 21st Century since its beginning 13 years ago. But then as of this past July, I agreed to become the director. And I'm privileged to be the director of the Church in the 21st Century Center. And there's no free lunch, so let me take a moment or two to do a station identification, as it were, of C21. Church in the 21st Century is founded by Father Leahy 13 years ago, and to be a catalyst and a resource for the reform and renewal of the Catholic Church. And it looks like we'll have work to do for quite a while. We're not going to run out of good things to be doing anytime soon. It has been such a center. One of the best things we do is we publish twice a year, once each semester, C21 resources. And you'll find copies on the table on the way out. And you'll also, if you would like to sign up and receive copies going forward, we're very happy to mail them. We mail over 180,000 copies each semester to all BC grads and then to about 25,000 friends. And in 2 issues ago, what we basically do is we take some pressing pastoral issue, and then we find a faculty person who has expertise in that area, and we ask them to find the 15 or 16 best pieces that are available that we can find on that particular topic, and then even to boil them down to 500 words, 800 words, and then to publish them in this one little volume. And it's spectacular, the kind of quality of resource that it becomes. It's kind of a digest of the topic, and tremendously usable. And indeed, the issue before last, the last essay in the previous issue on global poverty, is written by Dr. Carolyn Woo, and our speaker this evening. And usually the C21 theme of the resources issue also suggests the theme of many of the lectures we offer. So, for example, the fall issue of C21 resources was on our faith, our stories. And so we've been consistently inviting people of distinction to come and tell us their story of their work and of their own story of their life and faith. And this evening we're very privileged to have a tremendous, spectacular representative of that and telling her own story as well as the story of CRS. So the pattern of our evening is that Dr. Woo will give some remarks and then has invited me to ask her some questions, and which I will be happy to do. Then we will move into some conversation together to a neighbor or two, just reflecting on what you've heard and what you're taking away from the conversation. And then we'll come back to some general conversation with her to conclude the evening. Last night, I came across a story by Anne Lamont. And Anne tells a story of when she was 7 years of age, her best friend got lost in her downtown area. She'd gone down shopping with her mom and got separated, and then panicked, ran in the wrong direction, and found herself totally lost and couldn't find any familiar landmarks to find her way home. A kind police person recognized the little child as distraught and asked her what was wrong, and she said, "I don't know my way home." And she said, the police person said, "Well, let's drive around a bit and maybe we'll find a landmark that you recognize," because the child couldn't remember her home address. So they rode around for a little while, and suddenly the little girl saw her church. And she said, "Oh, officer, that's my church. I know how to get home from here. That's my church, and I know how to get home from here." In many ways, as I think about the great work of Catholic Relief Services, since 1943, reaching out to some 90 million people in 101 different countries on all 5 continents, in works of compassion and works of justice. When I see that work of CRS, I'm very proud to say, that's my church. And I know my way home from here. And our way home very clearly entails, demands, as Pope Francis consistently reminds us now, demands the works of compassion and the works of justice. Compassion for those in immediate need, and then justice to address the causes of their suffering, with a special favor, of course, for those to whom life is most denied. In other words, the poor. We see the spectacular witness of Pope Francis in Africa over the past 7 or 8 days. So for my money at least, and I do give a little money to CRS, and by the way, their overheads are literally only 8%. In other words, of every dollar we give to CRS, 92 cents of it goes to the causes for which we intended. That's a fantastic record, especially in the world of philanthropy. So I think there is nothing that our church does in the world that is more important than the work of CRS. Very often our church indeed falls far short of the gospel values that we preach. Mostly, of course, because it's made up of sinners like myself. And yet you come back to a place and to the work of CRS and you recognize what wonderful work our church does in the world and how proud we can be of that. Dr. Carolyn Woo is the president and chief CEO of Catholic Relief Services. She's now completing her 4th year. She began as president in January of 2012 after a very distinguished academic career. She started at Purdue in 1972 as an undergrad and didn't leave there for 25 years. But she did get a BA, an MA, a PhD, and then a faculty appointment. So don't think she took 25 years to do her undergrad work. She graduated, she left Purdue in 97, whisked away by Notre Dame, that little school out in South Bend, Indiana. And at Notre Dame, she served as dean of the university's Mendoza College of Business. Dr. Woo's Catholic News Service monthly column took first place prize in the 2013 Catholic Press Association Awards in the category of Best Regular Column in Spirituality. She is a recipient of many honors, including an honorary doctorates from Providence College, from the University of St. Francis, from Lewis University, and from the University of Notre Dame. Dr. Woo grew up in Hong Kong, one of my favorite places, and was educated there by the Maryknoll sisters. She's married to Dr. David Barkus, whom she met at the Newman Center at Purdue, and they have two sons, Ryan and Justin. I'm in awe of anyone who has more than one. I've often said that if and when our church decides to create some women cardinals, and theologically, of course, that is perfectly possible. There's a long tradition in the history of the church of lay cardinals, because cardinals only have 2 jobs, to advise the Pope and to elect the next one. So you don't have to be ordained to be a cardinal. So when our church does appoint some women cardinals, I always imagine that Carolyn Woo will be one of the first nominees. And I would certainly vote strongly for her. On the other hand, she might well turn down the nomination, because as president of CRS, she probably does more good work in any given day than any cardinal does, with the possible exception, of course, of our Cardinal Sean. Would you please welcome Dr. Carolyn Woo.
Thank you very much for welcoming me. This is the first time that I'm giving a talk at Boston College. I've come here several times, and this Gaston Hall is just absolutely beautiful and all the history that it comes with. I talk to a lot of people across the United States as well as overseas, but whenever I'm with a group like yourself, it reminds me of this is the vitality of the church. This is the future of the church. This is a group of people who makes the church real in today's world. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to show you a few videos. Part of this talk is to talk about myself, which is a very difficult and boring thing to do. So I asked Tom, who is so gracious, that at that point he could just ask me whatever question. Let's just begin with this picture here. This is the picture actually in our executive dining room, which is a small dining room. It's no bigger than half of this hall. And it's in the end of one wall. And we love this picture because it shows so much joy and so much health, and which is what we work for. And mother is healthy and 2 children, not even 1. And the next to the picture, there is a prayer. And the prayer says, Lord, please give food to those who are hungry, and for those who have food, please give them a hunger for justice. That pretty much sums up CRS work, is to meet needs, and physical needs are very important. And then for those of us whose needs are not physical in nature, not material in nature, and that is to give us a hunger for justice. By the way, there are many people standing. Feel free to sit on the floor or do something so that you don't have to stand through the whole conversation. So give food to those who are hungry, and for those who have food, a hunger for justice. So this is the back wall. But on the wall over here, when you go in, our left wall, it has beautiful pictures of nature, water and trees and seeds and all those wonderful things. And it says, may the bounty of the Lord, and on this side of the wall, people eating, spinning, cooking, and so on, be in the land of the living. We shall see the bounty of the Lord in the land of the living. And we are the people who are in the middle between those 2 walls. Well, it's the whole idea that the work that we do is because of God's abundance. It's because of God's bounty. The work of CRS is to just make sure that the bounty of the Lord is in the land of the living for everyone and now. Not after we die and go to heaven, but now and everywhere for every person. Our job is really the bridge that enable the access of the bounty of the Lord in the land of the living. And what a wonderful sense of looking at our work. We are just a medium. We are just a go-between. We are the people who we are collecting the harvest which God sends and make it possible for other people. That's really CRS in a nutshell. Megan is my technology person. So as Tom says, we are now over 70-some years old. We were actually created during World War II to bring refugees out of Europe. And many of them were resettled in the United States. Unfortunately, today we have the most number of refugees since World War II. In the world now, there are 60 million people who are displaced. There are about 20 million who are moving from one country to another. There are about 38 million who are moving within their own countries, such as in Iraq, such as in Syria. When your part of the country is being attacked by ISIL or the people who are shooting at ISIL, whatever it is, it's a war zone, you move to another part of the country. It's just like in Ukraine. If you are in Western Ukraine, if you're in Eastern Ukraine where Russians are, you move to Western Ukraine. And so in total, there are 60 million people who are displaced in the world. And so we're still serving the people who are in those type of desperate situations. Tom says we serve about 90 million people. We serve anywhere from about 85 million to 100 million people a year. Let's take a look at the next slide. This gives you some sense. This graph now is outdated, but we are in 103 countries. All the shaded areas are areas where CRS programming are involved. So we are in the poorest of countries, the most difficult of situations. We are in Central Africa region, where the Pope is just at. For several years now, we have been working with the Muslims as well as with the Protestants to do interfaith peace-building work. And we have brought these leaders together and actually taken them to Washington, D.C. to explain what is going on and to make sure that this conflict does not just break down along religious lines. We are in West Africa in the middle of Ebola season. We're still there, and there are cases that now coming back again. So Liberia was Ebola-free, but not long enough. And so we had actually shrunk our footprint in that part of the world right before Ebola exploded and we had to staff up again immediately for the 3 Ebola countries. And so you see, we're in Africa a lot, we're in South America, we're in the Middle East and the Far East. We go wherever there is a problem, whether it's natural disasters like the Philippines, like Nepal, these landslides, typhoons, and so on. And we go where there are long-term development issues of poverty, of disease, of malnutrition, of hunger, and so on. You will see, for example, so we serve about 100 million people. Our budget can go up and down. It could be as low as 650 million or as high as close to $1 billion. Part of it is because of emergency. Part of it is because, for example, we had a very large HIV/AIDS work. We passed that work to our partners. We work in almost every sector that we know about, because for 2 reasons. We have been around for a long time. We've been around for 70-some years. We understand, for example, hunger is not just an issue of giving people more food. That's not the issue. That's not the long-term solution. So the long-term solution requires you to be productive in the way that you farm. You know, and it relies on the soil, the health of the soil. It relies on the health of the seed. It relies to the adaptation of that plant to changing circumstances, including increase in temperature. It requires people to be literate so that they know what they're supposed to do. It requires them to be able to diagnose what's going on with their plant. It requires them to have a market so that they don't just sell to their neighbors who have exactly the same crops. It requires their children to be healthy and to be able to go to school. So all of this is what we call integral human development, which is a very Catholic concept. It's a whole idea that you have to solve the problems from all the different dimensions and at different levels, at the level of an individual, the family, and the community. So we are in many of these sectors. You can see agriculture, emergency health, peace building, water, sanitation, and so on. So in all, Catholic Relief Services is a pretty complex organization, right? Imagine serving in about 100 countries. That's complex geographically. Within these countries, we work with the local church. We are always invited in by the local church. So we have the local Catholic Church. We are also in the middle of the relationship of that church, of our Catholic Church, with the other faiths. We have to be sensitive and not mess up those relationships. We work with the local government. We work with the U.S. government. We work with the U.S. Catholic Church. We work with the Vatican. We have 163 brothers and sisters in the global Caritas network. So CRS is sort of the Caritas of the United States. We have Caritas agencies in India, in Pakistan, in Syria, in Iraq, in wherever. There are 164 other Caritas agencies. So we work with them too. In total, we work with 1,200 partner organizations, right? So that gives you some sense. The other thing to remember is that CRS has a big budget, but about 85% of that budget comes from some type of competitive grant. The U.S. Catholics are very generous. They supply about 15%, and increasingly we're increasing that percentage. So in a few years, it will be about 25% of our funding will come from the U.S. Catholics. But currently, about 85%, 80% of our funding, we go through a competitive process. We don't just get the grants because we are good-hearted or that we have a good reputation. We write a lot of grants. We write close to 400 grants a year in order to win the grants that allow us to do work in the way we want to. And some of our grants are very transformative. So nowadays we're working on, for example, water-smart agriculture or climate-smart agriculture. We are working on assisting very small farmers, sometimes less than 3 acres of land, and how to take them so that they go from barely subsisting to being prosperous. Okay? So what does that journey look like? It's a transformative journey. We are now working with health systems. So I just want to give you some sense, the complexity of what we do. Next chart, please. A lot of times people say we only hear about problems. You know, it's just more and more and more and more problems. Do we ever make progress? This is just a very short list. And the World Bank, the United Nations, USAID has a full list of what we were able to do as a humanitarian community. So these are just a few examples. I don't want to overwhelm you. But the mortality rate for children, which is children 5 years and under, has gone from 12 million a year to 7 or 6 million a year. We have achieved a reduction of 5 to 6 million kids who don't die, okay, over the last 30 years of our work. HIV/AIDS is very important to have zero transmission, which means that we end the problem with this generation and not the next generation. And so the whole idea of transmission from mother to babies, we now know that if they have the proper drug treatment, there will be only a 2% transmission, and we could stop it at, for 98% of the children who are born from mothers who are HIV positive. I just want to say one of the predictions, however, is that with young people coming into their own in a lot of these continents and they engage in risky behavior, there is a concern that the next generation, while they may be HIV-free, but that they may engage in risky behavior that could trigger the next global epidemic of AIDS. Right? But here we dealt with the issue, not we CRS, but we as a collective. Development sector dealt with that problem, the making available clean water. And so nowadays there's still about 1 billion people who don't have clean water, but over the last 20 years or so, we were able to provide access to clean water for about 2 billion people. So I just want to say clean water is critical, right? Because when you don't have clean water, particularly for children, you could die of diarrhea. You could die of all sorts of diseases. I don't know how many of you have seen dirty water when I say people only have access to dirty water. By the way, a lot of times they cannot boil it because boiling it requires a lot of fuel, and people don't have fuel. But let me describe to you the experience that I had that just absolutely defined for me what dirty water means. I don't know how many of you mop your own floor. I used to when I had my apartment, so you have a bucket of water, you have this mop, you mop, and then you put your mop back into the water and you squeeze out the dirty thing and you mop again. At the end of the mopping, what does your water look like? It's gray, it's blackish, it has stuff floating on it. Well, that is what dirty water means. This is what people would drink, right? When you don't have filtration, when you don't have treatment, and when you cannot boil the water, okay? So here is a lot of work again in terms of making clean water accessible. Here is the last one is the eradication of Guinea worm. People tell me it's a horrible disease. And the whole world is working towards reduction in malaria, reduction in polio, and so on. And those are difficult diseases. And part of the problem is not that we don't have the answer for it. Part of the problem is that not all countries buy into using those type of approaches. But these are just a few examples of the massive improvement in terms of billions of people who didn't die because they have clean water, millions of children who live past their 5th birthday. These are not small achievements. So I don't want anyone to ever say, there's no good that comes out of it. It's just problem after problem after problem, because that is so not true. Okay. Next slide, please. Go to the next one. So, but I just want to say we still have a lot of work to do. These numbers are slightly outdated, but we still have poverty. Poverty now in terms of extreme poverty, by the way, is $1.25 a day. The estimate is anywhere between about 900 million to 1.2 billion now live under $1.25 a day, and those who live under $4 a day, which is nothing to write home about, is probably 3 billion people or so. So poverty is still pretty prevalent. About 800, 900 million people go to bed hungry, malnutrition. In some countries like Guatemala, half of the children are stunted. So you have that problem. And of course, poverty is very much correlated with violence. 50% of the women still don't have access to proper maternal care, like delivering a baby in a clinic or with a care attendant. And of course, we still deal with the issue of clean water. So this gives you some sense of both the nature of CRS work. By the way, CRS is not my CRS. CRS is actually your CRS because it started by the U.S. Catholic Church. It belongs actually to the U.S. Catholic Church. It's the U.S. Catholic Church official arm to the world in terms of bringing the love of God. And what we do really is because of the gospel message, because God says He does not abandon anyone, right? And so we have the privilege on behalf of the U.S. Catholic Church to make God's promise real, make God's love real, okay? So this is us. But I also want to go into a second point that I want to focus on, and that is, it's not enough to do the work just out of good-heartedness. You have to be very, very good at what you do. So I just mentioned you have to win your grants. And you cannot just bring yesterday's solution into today's grant, particularly when some of those grants are for $40, $50 million for 5 years in a row. Nowadays, the expectation in development is that you have to be able to scale. Scale means you have to be able to serve tens of millions. Your solutions have to be sustainable. That is, after the grant ends, that work cannot just fall apart. You have to build enough capacity for that population and so on, so that the good work not only continues, but it can grow. And the third one is that you have to demonstrate evidence. How has your work been impactful? So it's not enough just to have a good heart. It's very important to do this work well. And in fact, one of my mentors was Father Hesberg, who passed away in February. He told me two things from day one I never forgot. And in fact, I live it every day. One of the two things he said was, mediocrity is not the way we serve the Blessed Mother. Okay? And translates into mediocrity is not the way we serve the church. And we have a great sense of responsibility as well as a great sense of privilege. And that is, we are given the resources to serve the poor. And it is not good enough to bring our second-class game. We have to bring our best game in order to serve the poor, because that is our privilege. A lot of times we don't like to change. Change is very difficult for organizations. But it's always the counterpoint, which is, then do we indulge in ourselves first and our beneficiaries second? It's not that we do bad things when we indulge. It's just that we are set in our ways and we don't grow, and we don't look for the most optimal use of resources, the most optimal way of delivering programs. So how do we hold ourselves in terms of the accountability and in terms of the operating excellence? That's very important to us. So I just want to say, so for CRS, innovation is very important. I want to just show you, we do a lot of innovation in the global health area, in our emergency work, our agricultural value chain, and what we call ICT 4D, which is the use of mobile technology. And by the way, these type of innovations is not easy. They are not difficult to understand. But again, remember, we work with 1,200 implementation partners. We ourselves have 5,000 colleagues. So the pain of the change is how do you populate and embed change into your culture? Because, you know, there's this complicated web of relationships and structures. So what I'm going to do next is just to show you a couple of videos to illustrate to you what we mean by innovation and change. So the first one to bring up is our AIDS work, our HIV/AIDS work, which formally ended around 2013 or so as we pushed that into our local partner network. We still do some of this work, But we've learned a lot from it, and I want you to have a sense of how problem solving and innovation takes place. Just a few points to illustrate this. Before CRS applied for this grant, we have never done HIV/AIDS work at this scale, maybe a little, but certainly not the whole idea of how to make this drug available to everyone in 10 countries. We've never done that work, right? And so it's forming a consortium to go after that. We won the grant, but you saw how many different problems you have to solve because there is no health system in a lot of these countries. By the way, it's the same thing in West Africa. When there is a health system operating, Ebola does not transmit or diffuse in the same way. But when there's no health system, you don't even know who has Ebola, right? But think about all the different problem solving that has to go on. By the way, the ART is a very complicated drug. It's difficult to transport and to save, to store. It is difficult to use because it requires twice the nutritional intake because it's very hard on your body. In addition to that, you also need people to be changing behavior, not just go on drugs. On top of that, you also have people who now survive, they become healthy, but they're stigmatized, right? So how do you deal with that issue? And on top of it, you have a lot of AIDS orphans. So how do you rebuild that community? So it's not just about can you deliver drugs. And besides, there's no infrastructure for some of these countries. So that's all the problem solving. And now today, we actually don't just run a program where we set up clinics and so on. We're now looking at health systems. Because from the HIV/AIDS work now, we know what are the elements that comprise a health system and how we could look broadly actually at the functioning of a whole health system from the health ministry all the way to the last mile of use in terms of personnel, supply chain, medical information records, efficiency in all of those steps, right? And it also leads us to other innovation. We are working on impact investing, for example, which is how do you use private capital to solve social problems. So that's just some sense of, because I'm talking to a lot of students, I want you to have a sense of sort of how exciting this field is and how it requires us to put our best thinking into it. The next two videos I want to show, and it's fairly short, is about how do we use the mobile technology. All of you have a cell phone. It has changed your life. But actually, there will be dramatic, even more significant dramatic changes because of digital strategy, digital technology in the development world. So the second I want to bring up is the ICT 4D video. So ICT 4D is Information Communication Technology for Development. And so I just want you to imagine every sector of our work. For that lady in India, there's high mortality rate because mothers don't know what to do, how to take care of their children. These community health workers are supposed to visit them, but they themselves are not very well trained. So they don't always give good advice. So now all of that information is loaded on the iPhone. She just has to press month number 1, month number 2. And also because it's audio and visual, the rest of the family also learns, particularly the mother-in-law, who is the most powerful person that allows that mother to rest, right? And so now we're actually expanding it to infant care. So this just mobile technology, it affects every sector of our work, whether it's health, agriculture, education, even peace building. And it affects every step of that work. It affects the registration of the beneficiaries. It affects the delivery of that service. It affects the monitoring and tracking of those people. And so, it gathers information. It even delivers money, for example, which is very important because a lot of women don't have access to a bank account. But if they have a cell phone now, they could actually get electronic money. And it changes their dependence on the men, for example. So that's just some idea, but think about how to apply digital technology to all of our programs, our 5,000 colleagues. It's a very, in fact, we don't even see this type of utilization in the United States, right? And my final video, just to show you, is how we are now using all of this technology, the back end of something like digital technology is the way that we collect information. And how do we use that information to evaluate our work? How do we share that information? And how do we learn from that information? Because if we don't learn, if we don't do our assessment, we won't be as effective as we can be. So our last one is really for you to take a look at sort of how do we do evaluation now that we are enabled by this technology. Particularly for the students who are here, I just want to say I'm sure you didn't come into a Catholic presentation expecting to see the last few videos, right? I mean, you just never did. But it's a whole idea that when we serve God, we have to bring our very best game, our most creative ideas, to be bold, to really kind of take on the problem and fashion solutions that reflect what we know today. There's no reason why Catholic ministries, social ministries need to be kind of like a few steps behind everything. And I think particularly for the audience, the students and our faculty audience and so on, here it's just really to say we welcome your ingenuity, we welcome your energy, because to really serve people well, to really be deserving of this particular opportunity, we just need to sort of be at our very, very best.